My name's Jonathan from the Major Projects Association, and I'm delighted to be talking to Nicole Wang from Deloitte about a report that they have just published on the prioritization of the infrastructure portfolio. Nicole, would you like to introduce yourself, and then let's talk a little bit about the report.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jonathan, and pleasure to be here. My name is Nicole Wang. I'm a partner in our infrastructure advisory practice here at Deloitte in Canada, and my focus is strategic investments in government policy. And as you know, I have worked in the UK and also previously in Australia, working with governments in those jurisdictions, looking at prioritizing investments in infrastructure.
Excellent, good. So it's a great report, but the question that first struck me was, why now? What is it about what's happening now that makes this report so pertinent?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the conversations I've been having with governments, all levels of government across jurisdictions, has been how do we prioritize infrastructure? There's a very careful balancing act of different objectives, and it's been should we say, a challenge for many in terms of how we think about prioritizing and how do we prioritize the limited funding to meet all these objectives that the government have, and also all the needs of people. I think being more mindful and conscious and thinking beyond just the conventional approach to make sure that we capture all the changes that's happening, and then we make sure that our decision making is sound. We just feel strongly that we need to put our thoughts out there to make sure that we contribute to the conversation and the debate that is happening across different jurisdictions. There are many strategic reasons why we will invest in infrastructure. So in the past, there's a mentality that if we build it, people will use it. And indeed, many infrastructure investments have contributed significantly to economic growth, urbanization, and better living standards. So there are many good reasons and many good decisions were made in the past. But over the last, I would say maybe a decade or so, we have seen and really felt the need to look beyond economic drivers for change, especially some of those social outcomes, equity and environmental concerns. All of those now need to come into the equations, or in fact, they do play into the decision making, just not so much in that conventional benefit cost approach. In many instances, infrastructure provides essential services to people. So we would think that it needs to be accessible for all. So we know that some of those social and environmental outcomes are more challenging or more difficult to quantify than your traditional economic drivers. And when we rely on BCAs that focus on those drivers, what then happens is your decisions is more gravitating towards building in high density areas, and perhaps areas that are more urbanized, so that you get that density impact. With social and environmental outcomes, sometimes it's actually counterbalancing those. So, for example, providing essential transit services to remote areas, to communities that are in more need of those services than, say, urban areas. Those decisions sometimes will be at risk if we are relying purely on benefit cost analysis.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, I guess one of the challenges is the problem of benefits and the fact that historically, for good reasons, sometimes governments have really struggled with understanding and actually measuring the benefits of infrastructure. It's been fine, let's do it, and then we built it, but there's nobody kind of looking at what the results of the CBA were, and whether we achieved the kind of social benefits that we were aiming for.
Yeah, exactly. There's a challenge of estimating it, measuring it, quantifying it, but there's also the challenge of ex post analysis in looking into whether it has achieved those outcomes, and whether we have taken the lessons learned into decision making going forward. But there are many anecdotes where it has pointed to better decision making from a strategic outcome perspective, not just traditional benefits. And I would say that if I point to my most recent experience in the UK, I was working with the UK Treasury and the organisation Infrastructure and Projects Authority. We were developing a supplementary tool for what they call the Green Book approach. And to those who's less familiar with the Green Book approach, it's issued by the Treasury in the UK. It provides pretty good guidance in terms of how decisions should be made in policies, projects, and programs. And there was a review back in, I think, 2020. It suggested a few improvements, one of which is precisely to that point of projects and programs need to demonstrate better alignment to strategic outcomes or government priorities. Because I think for many people who have been involved in business case development would feel that the strategic case sometimes is there because it's a ticking the box exercise. All the efforts and energy gone into debating the BCA and the BCR. There's lots of efforts into coming up with clever ways to quantify your benefits to get your BCR over the line. And that is an outcome of that, I would say, overemphasis on the BCR itself. What we're trying to do in that mindset shift is to prioritize projects based on strategic needs, the need for change, and strategic reasons why you would do it, whether it's from a social aspect or environmental outcomes is just as important. Once you have defined that need, the BCA serves as a way to find the most cost-effective way of delivering that outcome. So it's beyond just looking at whether you should, once you get to the BCA stage, it shouldn't be all about whether you are justifying doing something. Rather, it's justifying how you're going to do it. So we, in order to do that though, because the challenge is much beyond the methodology, in my view. There's how government make decisions, how decision process is introduced, embedded in the way that government works, and even how governments agencies collaborate in order to achieve common outcomes. All of those have been in the past developed, evolved in a way that is leading to, as we talked about, the focus on the benefit costs analysis and the return on investment from an economic perspective. But now we see more collaboration is required across different agencies because outcomes are much more beyond one department now. And so the reason why we look into developing this tool is to help projects and programs to think beyond the conventional benefit costs, to think about strategic outcomes that not just your own department, but across government, how your projects and programs are contributing to those outcomes. So people started to think about even, say, for example, for Department for Transport, they will look at a lot of the transport connectivity benefits and and probably will look into the levelling up agenda and how that will contribute to government's priority in that. But once we start looking beyond that, thinking about how your transport connectivity actually also contributes to some of the industry growth in areas that have been a little bit, should we say, left behind, and thinking about how they can contribute to the growth of those industry through supply chain effect. And that's not something that traditionally, being in a specific government agency, you would look beyond that. So once we have developed that tool that probably put all the priorities on the page and demonstrating what those priorities mean for different departments, as project developers or people who's informing decision making can look beyond their own priorities and say, actually, I need to talk to this other department because there's a priority that my project can help to contribute, but we need to create some alignment so that making sure that what I'm doing here is indeed going to enable those outcomes the other department is looking into. So I would say that it's a learning process for many of us who's been in this space. And there's for those who are keen to kind of get involved in this and really understand how the methodology, the mindset, and the process and the ways of working need to really change in order to enable better outcomes for all. That's an area that definitely we should explore further. And another important aspect, I would say, is stakeholder engagement and really understand the needs of the, should we say, that not just the stakeholders, but the users and people will be affected by the investment. I think stakeholder engagement is too often treated as another ticking the box exercise. But in my view, in order to have the best solution, we really need to understand the needs of the people that who will be either using it or affected by the investment, and the language that we use in business case need to reflect their language and need to resonate with them, because our job is to provide services to those who need it the most. And you know, to your point, Jonathan, we're not doing this project to people. We are providing services to them that they will find most helpful. So we need to make sure that the business case is also drafted in a language that resonate with them, that we are demonstrating how this is going to affect them in a positive way, and how we as government will support them in their journey.